This plant just caught its dinner. This one is screaming right now. This one remembers you. This one can count to 5. None of this is exaggeration. This is real, published science. Plants are far more alive than we were ever taught. Number 10 hunts. Number 5 talks to its neighbors. And number 1 might genuinely be intelligent. If nature blows your mind, subscribe now. Let's start the countdown. Number 10. The Venus flytrap doesn't just passively wait for insects to land on it. It actually counts the number of times something touches the tiny trigger hairs lining the inside of its trap. A single touch does nothing at all, since the plant needs to conserve energy and avoid closing on raindrops or debris. But a second touch within about 20 seconds tells the plant something living is actually moving inside the trap. That second signal triggers the trap to snap shut in less than a tenth of a second, one of the fastest movements in the entire plant kingdom. But the counting doesn't stop there, because the plant needs even more confirmation before it commits to digesting its catch. A third, fourth, and fifth touch from the still struggling insect tell the plant it's worth the massive energy cost of producing digestive enzymes. Without reaching that fifth touch, the trap actually reopens within about 12 hours, releasing whatever triggered it as a false alarm. This means the Venus flytrap is genuinely performing basic arithmetic using nothing but electrical signals moving through its own cells. Researchers studying this mechanism have compared it directly to short-term memory, something almost nobody expected to find in a plant with no brain or nervous system. A creature that looks completely stationary is quietly running a 5-step counting system just to decide whether a meal is actually worth eating. Number 9. The mimosa plant folds its leaves shut within a single second of being touched, a defense reaction so fast it looks almost like an animal flinching. This rapid folding is caused by water rushing out of specialized cells at the base of each leaf, instantly collapsing their internal pressure. Scientists in 2014 designed an experiment to test something genuinely unexpected, whether this plant could actually learn from experience. They repeatedly dropped the plants from a small height, which normally triggers the defensive folding response every single time. But after a handful of repeated drops with no actual danger attached, the plants gradually stopped folding their leaves entirely. This is a behavior called habituation, essentially learning to ignore a harmless repeated stimulus, and it's normally only documented in animals with actual brains. Even more remarkably, researchers later retested the same plants and found they still remembered not to react even a full month later. This suggests the plant wasn't simply running out of energy to react, it was genuinely retaining information about what was and wasn't actually dangerous. A plant with no brain, no neurons, and no nervous system appeared to form something that looked genuinely close to a real memory. Number 8. The Sundew plant is covered in tiny, glistening, sticky droplets that look almost identical to fresh dew, which is exactly how it gets its name and lures unsuspecting insects. But those droplets aren't water at all, they're an extremely sticky, sugary mucilage strong enough to trap and hold an insect in place almost instantly. Once an insect is trapped, nearby tentacles on the same leaf begin slowly curling inward, sometimes taking several minutes to fully wrap around the struggling prey. This entire curling motion is a genuine, deliberate movement response, not a passive trap like a spider's web that simply waits for something to arrive. Researchers have discovered that sundews can actually distinguish between a genuinely nutritious insect and a random piece of harmless debris landing on the same droplet. Debris typically triggers only a weak, brief response, while a struggling insect releasing specific chemical compounds triggers a much stronger, sustained digestive reaction. This means the plant is essentially performing chemical analysis on its own food source before deciding how much energy to invest in digesting it. A plant covered in what looks like harmless morning dew is quietly running a full sensory and decision-making system every single day. We're 3 plants in, and everything from here gets significantly stranger. If you're already hooked, go ahead and subscribe right now before we continue. Number 7. The bladderwort is widely considered one of the fastest predators in the entire natural world, and most people have never even heard of it. This underwater plant has tiny, hollow bladder-shaped traps that maintain a partial vacuum inside them, constantly ready to spring into action. When a tiny aquatic creature brushes against the trigger hairs on the outside of the bladder, the trapdoor snaps open in less than a millisecond. This creates a sudden inward rush of water so powerful and so fast that it sucks the prey directly inside before it has any chance to react or escape. Scientists using high-speed cameras discovered this entire capture sequence happens faster than any other confirmed movement anywhere in the plant kingdom, including the Venus flytrap. After a successful capture, the trap slowly resets itself over several hours, quietly pumping the water back out to restore that internal vacuum pressure once again. This means a single bladderwort plant can have hundreds of these tiny traps active at once, each one independently loaded and ready to fire at any given moment. This unassuming pond plant with delicate purple flowers is quietly one of the deadliest and fastest hunters hiding in plain sight in freshwater ecosystems everywhere. Number 6. The stinging nettle looks like an ordinary weed, but each of its tiny hairs functions almost exactly like a hypodermic needle. These tiny hollow structures are actually filled with a mix of histamine, formic acid, and other chemical compounds specifically designed to cause pain. When brushed against skin, the tip of each hair breaks off cleanly, transforming the remaining structure into a sharp, hollow tube that injects its contents directly beneath the skin. This mechanism is genuinely comparable to how an actual medical syringe works, evolved entirely by a plant with absolutely no awareness of what medicine even is. Interestingly, this same painful defense mechanism is being studied by researchers hoping to design better, less painful microneedle systems for actual medical drug delivery. Certain caterpillar species have actually evolved to eat nettle leaves specifically because most other insects avoid them entirely, giving these caterpillars an entire food source almost completely to themselves. A plant most people casually avoid on hiking trails turns out to have independently evolved the exact same delivery mechanism found in modern medical technology. Number 5. Certain trees in a forest can genuinely warn each other about incoming danger, and they do it through an underground network researchers have nicknamed the Wood Wide Web. This network is built from vast webs of underground fungi that physically connect the root systems of different trees, sometimes even across different species entirely. When one tree gets attacked by insects, it can release specific chemical signals through this fungal network, warning neighboring trees to begin producing defensive compounds in advance. Researchers have documented cases where these warned neighboring trees successfully repelled the same insect attack days before it actually reached them physically. Older, larger trees in a forest, sometimes called mother trees, appear to actively direct nutrients through the same network toward younger, struggling seedlings nearby. This behavior looks remarkably similar to how animal parents allocate resources to their offspring, an unexpected parallel that genuinely surprised forest ecologists when it was first documented. A forest that looks like a silent collection of separate, individual trees is actually one enormous, cooperating, communicating community operating entirely underground. Number 4. The telegraph plant, also called the dancing plant, has small leaflets that visibly move on their own, even without any wind, touch, or outside stimulus whatsoever. These small leaflets rotate in a jerky, circular pattern that early observers genuinely described as looking like the plant was dancing to music nobody else could hear. The movement is actually driven by rapid, constant changes in water pressure within specialized cells at the base of each individual tiny leaflet. What makes this genuinely strange is that scientists still don't have a complete, confirmed explanation for exactly why this constant movement happens in the first place. Some researchers believe it may help the plant maximize sunlight exposure throughout the day, while others suspect it could play some role in deterring insects. Interestingly, researchers have also found that these leaflet movements can genuinely respond to certain frequencies of sound, particularly the frequency range of human speech. A plant that appears to dance without any wind, and possibly responds to the sound of your own voice, remains one of botany's most genuinely unexplained mysteries. Number 3. This bizarre parasitic plant spends most of its life completely underground, only surfacing briefly to produce a flower that smells deliberately, disgustingly like rotting flesh. This plant has no leaves, no chlorophyll, and no ability to photosynthesize at all, since it survives entirely by parasitically stealing nutrients from the roots of nearby host plants. The rotting flesh smell is a deliberate evolutionary strategy specifically designed to attract dung beetles and carrion beetles, tricking them into landing directly inside the flower. Once inside, the flower structure temporarily traps the confused insects, forcing them to crawl through pollen-covered chambers before eventually allowing them to escape. This entire elaborate deception exists purely to ensure the trapped insects carry pollen away with them to the next disgusting-smelling flower they encounter. A plant with no leaves, no green color, and no visible presence above ground for most of its life has evolved one of the most elaborate insect deception schemes in all of botany. Number 2. This plant can survive being completely dried out for years at a time, then fully revive itself within just a few hours after receiving water. When conditions become extremely dry, the plant curls its entire body into a tight brown ball and essentially shuts down all visible biological activity completely. In this dried state, the plant loses roughly 95% of the water content in its cells, a level of dehydration that would permanently kill almost any other plant species. Scientists have kept dried samples of this exact plant preserved in museum collections for over 100 years, then successfully revived them simply by adding water. The plant cells produce a special sugar compound that essentially replaces the missing water inside them, physically preventing the cell structures from collapsing while dried out. Researchers are now studying this exact sugar mechanism for potential use in preserving human organs, blood, and even vaccines without requiring constant refrigeration. A shriveled brown ball that looks completely dead could genuinely hold the key to solving one of modern medicine's most persistent storage and transportation problems. And now, number 1. In 2016, researchers ran an experiment on ordinary pea plant seedlings that genuinely stunned the entire scientific community. They placed pea seedlings in a Y-shaped tube, forcing each plant to choose between growing toward one of two possible paths as it developed. One path led toward a light source that would briefly flicker on and off in a specific, predictable pattern over several days of testing. After learning this predictable flickering pattern, researchers then removed the light entirely and tested whether the plant would still choose that same direction anyway. The pea seedlings consistently grew toward the direction where they had learned to expect the light, even though there was genuinely nothing there anymore. This is a form of behavior called associative learning, essentially predicting future events based on past patterns, something previously believed to require an actual brain. A plant with absolutely no neurons, no nervous system, and no brain whatsoever appeared to genuinely predict and act on a future event based purely on past experience. 10 plants, a flytrap that counts to 5, and a mimosa that remembers a harmless drop for an entire month. A sundew that chemically analyzes its food, and a bladderwort with the fastest trap in the entire plant kingdom. A nettle with a built-in syringe, and an entire forest quietly warning itself underground through a hidden fungal network. A dancing plant that moves without wind, and a fake corpse flower that tricks beetles into carrying its pollen. A plant that revives after 100 years dead, and a simple garden pea that appeared to genuinely predict the future. If this genuinely changed how you look at plants, subscribe now, because next week we're covering 10 more, and honestly, some of them are even harder to believe than this list. See you next week, and next time you walk past an ordinary looking plant, remember it might be paying more attention to you than you think.